As soon as AI becomes more possible, people go, oh my God, the world is going to be taken over by machines. The human race is going to either be eliminated or turn into a battery source like in the Matrix, or all these Terminator Skynet ideas come up. What is your take on, is there a danger from AI? And what are, whether yes or no, what are the concerns that we should be having? For instance, in this project, I want to really start a critical discussion about AI, the promises and the dangers, for instance, bias in machine learning algorithms. Sure. So what do you see as being the issues that should be addressed?
Well, I think, so long term, I think the science fiction writers have had it right, that we are in many ways building the successor to the human race.
So you really think that that's true?
But I think it's very, very long term. I think and we may not be around long enough to even realize that, because there's other things that are between climate change and what we're doing to the earth, which may overcome us, long before we've got Skynet or machines taking over the world. In fact, I think that we'll probably first go through a period of tremendous enrichment because of AI, and also intelligence amplification and all of these things where we will have a period of time in which we're getting tremendous benefit out of AI. So I'm not afraid in the near term of too much power going over to the machines. Longer term, much longer term, then perhaps so. And that I do kind of feel that we are, and again, it's written in many of the science fiction books, starting to replace parts of our bodies with machinery and things like that. We can, with advances in biology, we can start having control over our own biological processes. And so we are evolving. We've stopped evolving based on natural selection of our genes. That's over. We can keep everybody alive regardless of their genetic nature or whatever. And now we are going to start evolving, I think, culturally. And part of cultural evolution, I think, is using AI as part of our existence. So I'm not worried about the near term. As a matter of fact, I'm looking forward to the next 10, 20 years or so.
But then, of course, the long term is built up of many shorter near terms. So what issues should we be looking at? And there's just one thing that pops to mind as this denial of service attack was addressing webcams and things. If we start having more and more smart implants in our bodies, is it possible that somebody then takes over all of
right? So I think the biggest near-term problem, and I think Scott McNealy coined the phrase, and I think it's true, is that you have no privacy, get over it. And that has lots of different meanings. It's not just the fact that we've got cameras everywhere. It means that we are living in, our lives are being observed, and therefore our lives can be hacked. And so there will have to be cultural changes. And the way we always deal with other human beings is through our societal norms and our laws, and those are going to have to evolve. And that, I hope, will evolve in still protecting our essential rights as individuals, but also then get the benefits of, I think, in a more observed society. I think that people when they are observed, they tend to do less bad.
But
and so maybe a little more observation might be good. Too much observation, and we have Big Brother.
But there's already the case that the NSA is recording essentially all of our communications, and people who unfortunately have a name that's the same as somebody who's on a terrorist watch list will then find themselves barred from flying,
right.
And have
so I think
redress, no way to say, wait a minute, why?
But your point is exactly right. The redress is important. Knowing what information is collected, being able to correct information, that's where we're going to have to evolve, because that's the only way to correct those problems. Crowdsourcing is tremendously powerful. But we need then people to be able to have that input going back into a process. And you should be able to, you should absolutely know what they have recorded of you, that you can change anything. If you can show proof otherwise, you should be able to do that. And I think that openness is going to have to become a two-way street.
But it also means that if there's a shift, for instance, as happened after 9/11, there was a feeling in this country that reminded me so much of the McCarthy era, when anybody who said something against George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq for no particular good reason other than his own ego, would look over their shoulders before saying something. There was this feeling in the country for the first couple of years after 9/11 and after George W. Bush then said, this gives me vast powers in the name of security to control everything. And there was no redress because there was a majority of Americans who thought that this level of security made sense.
Well, I think we actually had no redress because most Americans didn't know what was going on. And that, so the information collection and everything else like that was not assumed to be going on by most people. And that they didn't realize that, yes, there could be this capability to record everything, all the telephone conversations and everything else. So I think that it always comes down to an informed public, and that we need to be, transparency is the best solution. I mean, so that's what I think we're asking corporations to do, to be transparent. We want our government to be transparent. And I think that will create additional benefits beyond, the erosion of the privacy that we're seeing now, but it will take those changes. And so as more and more systems come in, AI, automatic decisions being made on, without a human looking at that decision, that's where I think that we have to have transparency so that we know if those decisions are being correct. Most of the times that machines are making decisions for us, for pilots who are piloting airplanes and everything else, they're great. We couldn't fly if we had to have humans making all those decisions. We need AI. We need machines participating with us in this. But I think then that we are a long, long way from them taking over the world in terms of that, even though I think that we'll see much more a cultural sort of shift towards a much more blended machine-human kind of environment.
Do you know of organizations that are working on this transparency?
I think none come to mind immediately by name, but there's several groups that are trying to look at the ethical consequences of
the
AI.
Electronic Frontier Foundation?
EFT is doing some of that work as well as others, yes.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, as in after 9/11, that transparency can be revoked at any time that there is fear, and people who have an authoritarian bent, if they're the president at the time, then they can decide to revoke that transparency, probably hide the fact that they've revoked that transparency, and put in all sorts of systems which maybe the public at large wouldn't want to have.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was interesting in, I don't know, 2005 or something like that. I think when Peter Graff, my husband, was visiting Rooster Kale's Internet Archive and looking at how many servers this small nonprofit needed in order to archive the entire web, he realized, wait a minute, that means that storage is now cheap enough. So, for instance, the NSA could simply monitor and record all communications, and it's easier to store all of it rather than say, what should we store, and make that decision. So, at that point, way before Snowden's revelations, it was clear to Peter and myself, at least, that everything was being recorded. And several years later, then Snowden said, oh, everything's being recorded, and everyone went, what? How could that be? So it's really clear that the capacity for doing this comes often years before a public consciousness of it happens, and if Snowden hadn't made that revelation, then there'd probably be sort of small groups saying, by the way, it is possible that the NSA is recording everything. Right. And the vast majority would say, yes, but we're a democratic nation, so we don't believe that it's actually happening. So without Snowden's revelations, I think there would have been a lot of denial of what is really happening, even...
Yeah. Well, we've had the capabilities to tap phones for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And so as citizens, though, we believe at least that can't be done without an authorization of a judge. I mean, so we've tried to establish laws around when that can be done. So the capability's been there. And now we have it on a massive scale that we can do that. Again, what do you do with that information? Every time you walk into a convenience store, there's a video camera while you are making your purchase or anything else, because that's protecting the store from people shoplifting. Those tapes generally get destroyed after a week, maybe, but they could easily be shipped off someplace and kept forever. So there is a lot of recording that's going on. And I think as a society, we're going to have to adapt to that. And so I think the critical question, I've even been, if you talked with, I've been talking with my daughter about that, in a world in which everything is being recorded. And she believes everything is being recorded, so again, get over it, that's just the way the world is. Do people behave better or do they behave worse? Mm-hmm. That, I think, is an interesting question. And I think that your earlier comments, though, about then when there are decisions being made about those things, do you have a right of redress? Because the decisions might be wrong, or it might not actually pertain to you. It's somebody who looked like you couldn't have been there, all of that stuff. Do you have redress, and do you have then transparency about what's being recorded?
Or of course, worst case scenario is that they make a decision, for instance, to storm your house and shoot you without
well, that's been done since the Black Panthers, actually, from a long time ago. So yeah, there's always abuse. I mean, and we've tried to set up a system of laws and a government to protect the individual against abuse by authority. And I think we're going to have to get more sophisticated about it, because the forms of the abuse are getting more difficult to sort of detect, particularly if people don't know they are being recorded.